Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Lottie and this is my December wrap up. So it's time for my final wrap up for 2022 and it is obviously my December wrap up. So I had a pretty good reading month in December. I'm so pleased with myself. After the disaster that November was, I just managed to bring back my reading, and I actually did most of my reading in the week between Christmas and New Year's. So I think it's just the time off, it really helps. It helped me to sit down and focus and got me back into the mood to read and get really excited about my reading year in 2023. As always, I'll be talking through my reading statistics for December before I go on into my mini reviews of each of the books that I read. So in December I read a grand total of 8 books, which is equal to 2,471 pages and averages out to 80 pages per day. I'm so pleased with this number. For my star ratings, I had 1 3-star read, 1 4-star read, and everything else was a 5-star read. So not only did I manage to read a lot in December, it was a really good reading month for me, and that is an average of 4.6 stars per book. For my genres, I was doing things a little bit differently in December to how I usually do, and I read 3 literary fiction, 2 fantasy, 2 romance, and 1 contemporary book. In terms of the media I was consuming, 7 of the books that I read in December were physical and 1 of them was an audiobook. For format, everything was a bit of a mixed bag. In December I read 5 novels, 1 short story collection, 1 manga and 1 novella. In terms of my age categories, 5 of the books that I read were adult and 3 were young adults. And finally, for my acquired TBR, 6 of the books I have acquired in 2022. 1 was a reread and 1 was a book that I had acquired previously. So now that is done, let's get on with what those books are. So the first book that I read in December was Tales from the Shadowhunter Academy by Cassandra Clare, which is a short story collection as a companion to the world of the Shadowhunters. This I read as a part of By the Angel Along, which is hosted by Becca from the Becca Fowl, and this was our November book, but obviously I ended up reading it in December. It is a very chunky book, so I just couldn't quite squeeze it in to November, but I did manage to read it in time for the live show because sadly it kept being pushed back, which actually worked out in my favour. This is obviously a companion novel to the world of the Shadowhunters. It takes place after the end of the Mortal Instruments series, and we are following a very main character from the Mortal Instruments as they go to the Shadowhunter Academy. I can't really talk too much about this book without giving away spoilers for the Mortal Instruments, but I will say I gave it 5 stars and I absolutely loved it. It is my favourite book in the world of the Shadowhunters so far. I really enjoyed the short story format, and I feel like it suited well because we were seeing snapshots of what was happening to our main character as they had their 2 years of training at the Shadowhunter Academy. We also had a few flashback stories where the story was sort of being told to our main character about something that had happened at the Shadowhunter Academy several years ago, and we also got to see some of their very familiar faces and get caught up with our friends from the Mortal Instruments series. I just absolutely loved a few of the stories. The penultimate one was probably my favourite out of the whole book, which focuses on Magnus Bane. If you've read it, you'll know which one I'm talking about, but yeah, I just really enjoyed this. It is such a important part of the world of the Shadowhunters, and I feel like if you skip this book and these short stories, then you are missing out on a lot of information in this world. I completely understand why Becca wanted us to read this where we did for the read along, because things that are going to take place after this book, if you haven't read it, you'll just miss out on important details. I'm really looking forward to carrying on with the world of the Shadowhunters. We're starting with A Lady Midnight in January. I'll leave a link to the second announcement video in the description if you would like to join in with By the Angel Along, as we are starting a new year. We're starting with a new series and you can easily jump in where you would like to. So yes, 5 stars, absolutely love this one. So the second book I read in December was This Winter by Alice Oseman, which is a companion novella to Heartstopper, which is a graphic novel series, and it's also a companion novella to Solitaire, which was Alice Oseman's debut novel. So This Winter is a Christmas story focusing on the Spring family, and we follow the perspectives of Tori, Charlie and Oliver as different things happen to them on Christmas Day. So in terms of the Heartstopper timeline, I guess. This takes place in the middle of volume 4 of Heartstopper, and I think it's just after the events of Solitaire, if I remember correctly. But you can kind of jump in with this book wherever you like if you have read the Heartstopper graphic novels. This was originally published as a Solitaire novella, and it's been rebranded as a Heartstopper novella because it does tend to focus more on Nick and Charlie. So in Heartstopper, we're following Nick and Charlie. They are boyfriends, and it's kind of just the story of their relationship, and this is a short story about them during one Christmas. This is a very heavy novella. It does talk a lot about mental health, and Charlie does deal with a lot of mental health issues, so do bear in mind that if you would like to give this whole world a go, and this novella in particular. But I absolutely loved diving back into the world of Heartstopper and catching up with the boys after I'd read the graphic novels earlier in 2022. I'm really looking forward to reading Solitaire at some point, and also the other novella Nick and Charlie, and also obviously to see the final Heartstopper graphic novel come out, hopefully in 2023. I think I'm going to be very sad when it comes to an end, but I've absolutely loved seeing Nick and Charlie and their relationship. I really want to reread the graphic novels after reading this because it's just so wholesome despite the subject matter. And I also, as well, for a young adult novel that talks a lot about mental health, I feel like it's really, really important for young people to sort of learn about how they can reach out if they are struggling, especially as someone who struggled quite a lot with their mental health as a teenager. I do really relate a lot to Tori and Charlie in different ways, and I think that they are just wonderful examples in the world of literature for young people to sort of see that not everything is perfect and not everybody has this perfect life. I really, really love this one, 5 stars. And then the next book that I read in December was a complete surprise to me, and it was my reread of The Hobbit by J.R.R. Tolkien. So I have read this a few times now, and I decided to pick up the audiobook, which is read by Andy Serkis, because one night in December I couldn't sleep, and I've got the entire like Lord of the Rings Hobbit collection on Audible. When I was subscribed to that, I was like, I don't know what to do, I'll just put this on to try and help me get to sleep one night, and it did help me get to sleep, but it also made me really want to reread the book, so I did. The audiobook is fantastic. It is read by Andy Serkis, who plays Gollum in the films, and he is absolutely brilliant as a narrator. He does all of the voices of the characters. He does Bilbo and Gandalf so well, and I really love the way that he did Smaug as well. The audiobook is such a brilliant experience. It almost feels like it's full cast, even though it's just read by Andy Serkis, and I can't recommend it enough. If you are really wanting to get into the world of Tolkien, I definitely recommend trying to listen to those audiobooks as a way to get in. My only complaint is there is so much singing in the book, and it's I guess a little bit tedious at times, but it's quite funny listening to Andy Serkis do the singing, so at least it brings a little bit of humour in there while you're listening to it. So The Hobbit, if you have no idea what this is about, this follows a hobbit called Bilbo as he goes on an adventure. He is recruited into the company of Thorin Oakenshield, who is the king of the dwarfs essentially, and they are going back to reclaim their homeland. And along the way, lots of different things happen to them. They have a lot of misfortune, and ultimately it's just a story of an adventure and a quest. It's like the first fantasy story essentially. It was written back in 1937, and it is one of my all-time favourite books, and I'm so glad that I got to experience it again. I kind of fell out a little bit with Tolkien over the last few years because I do feel like it's very, very overhyped, and because it is quite old, it is a little bit pretentious with the writing, but listening to the audiobook has rekindled my love for it. I do really want to watch the films again. The way that The Lord of the Rings is kind of a lot of fantasy fans thing from like 10-20 years ago, The Hobbit is to me because I was a teenager when the Hobbit films were coming out. So anyone who was a teenager when the Lord of the Rings films were coming out, I kind of have that same feeling about the Hobbit as like people Lord of the Rings fans do. But I'm really looking forward to rereading all of the Lord of the Rings books at some point. I really want to do that in 2023, but I'm kind of going to do it on a bit of the down low. I feel like if I put it on a TBR, I'm less likely to read it, which sounds stupid, but I understand my thinking. Like I would not have read this if I put it on a TBR, but I absolutely love listening to the audiobook again, and I can't wait to listen to the rest of them. Andy Serkis is fantastic. There is one chapter that Gollum is in this book, and it was my favourite chapter in the whole thing, and I was really, really excited to get to it because I knew it was going to be brilliant, and it did not disappoint at all. So yeah, this was another 5-star. Of course, it's one of my favourite books, and I wasn't going to reduce my rating of it on a reread. So the next book that I read was Making Mine This Christmas by Lizzie Huxley Jones. Me reading a Christmas book, like who is she? So this was the Afterlight November pick for 2023, which is why I wanted to read it, because it's a Christmas book and I wanted to get to it pretty quickly. So this this is a romance. It reads very much like a classic Christmas rom-com film. Although the plot of it didn't reflect this very much, it reminded me a lot of films like The Holiday and Love Actually in terms of the tone of it all. It's also very reminiscent of Hugh Grant movies, I think, and especially Bridget Jones in terms of the humour. And it reminded me a little bit of the George Nicholson novels as well. So yeah, I rated this 4 stars. I did quite enjoy it. My only real complaints were the writing style. I believe it is a debut novel and it just had that general clumsiness that I tend to notice in debut novels. Not that it's anything bad on the author, it's just when you've written a book for the first time, you're not going to be as good as when you've written your 10th book, if you understand what I mean. The plot of this, we are following Haf, who goes to a Christmas party and kisses this guy under the mistletoe, just as a, hey, there's mistletoe, let's have a kiss. And his ex-girlfriend sees them. And his ex-girlfriend is kind of like, oh my god, is this your new girlfriend, to the guy, I can't remember his name now, because they're still kind of friends. And so Haf ends up pretending to be this guy's girlfriend for Christmas so that he can bring her home to his family, because his ex-girlfriend has told everybody that they're dating. While Haf is at his house for Christmas, she actually ends up falling for his sister. So I was a bit skeptical about the plot of this at first. I thought it was going to be quite weird, but it wasn't at all. Haf and the dude have actually quite a good platonic friendship, and there is no kind of weird romantic feelings in there thrown in with the sister. But I really enjoyed the relationship in this, especially how it felt a lot more like a story of friendship than it did a romance. It was just so kind of cutesy and fun and a happy read for the Christmas season. Obviously I'm recommending a Christmas book in January, but I know that there are people out there who like to read seasonal romances year round. I work in a library, I see the sort of things that people take out throughout the year. This was a really fun read. I would definitely consider picking up a Christmas romance in the future, but I probably wouldn't prioritise and go out of my way to read them. And I'm definitely interested to see what Lizzie Huxley Jones has to write in the future, especially as they are a disabled non-binary author. They are autistic, and they actually have a little note at the end of the book that the main character Haf is written to be autistic, even though it's not explicitly stated on page. And I did really enjoy that little bit of subtlety. The love interest, whose name escapes me as well, she is also disabled. She does walk with a cane, and it is talked about quite a lot in the book and how it affects her daily life as well. So it's not sort of thrown in there and that's it for the representation. It is talked about throughout the book, which I do appreciate as well. So yeah, I actually quite enjoyed this 4 stars. I definitely recommend it. It was such a fun, cute read for Christmas. The next book I read was a little bit weird to put in for my stats, but it is the Heartstopper Yearbook by Alice Oseman. So this isn't really a story and it's not really a non-fiction, but it is about the world of Heartstopper. This is a bit of an art book. It's a bit of a history of Heartstopper, and it also has a few bonus stories in here as well. It's a bit like an annual, if you remember getting those when you were a kid, and they had like little activities to do and like stories and stuff like that. It was such a cute thing. I read it on Christmas Day as well, which was really nice. This was actually gifted to me from Catherine, so thank you, Catherine. I'm really pleased that you got this for me. I rated it 5 stars, but it was a weird one because it's not really a book, like a story. I enjoyed seeing the history of Heartstopper and sort of how Alice Oseman's art style had developed throughout the years, and also how they came up with the idea for Heartstopper. I really enjoyed hearing about how the like TV show got picked up and everything, and reading the couple of short stories in there, and just seeing the artwork as well, like looking at the characters and all the little drawings that Alice has done over the years for different times of the year as well. I can't really recommend it because it's not a book, but if you really love Heartstopper, check it out. It is like a very nice little companion to the world of Heartstopper, and just to see those little bonus bits as well was really nice. I then got started on my cat books vlog in December, and the first book I read for that was The Cat Who Saved Books by Sosuke Natsukawa. So this is a Japanese translated literary fiction about a cat who goes to visit a bookshop and tells the dude that he needs to help him save some books. So in this we are following Rintaro. His grandfather has just died and he has inherited his grandfather's bookshop, and he's looking after it in the period between him moving back home with his aunt, I believe. One day while the shop is closed, he hears a little bell on the door go, and a cat has walked in, and the cat literally says to him, I need you to come and help me save some books. So Rintaro goes on 3 adventures to save books, and they all have a different thing happening. I really enjoyed this. It completely changed my outlook on reading and sort of prompted me to examine how I read and how I consume books. The villains in this story are all committing heinous crimes to books. So in the first one, the villain is locking books away and never touching them. The second one is cutting up books to make it faster to read them, so he's reducing the stories to just like one sentence. The third one, he is just publishing like stuff to satisfy the desire for like quick and easy reads, and kind of ignoring old books and more challenging books and longer books as well. So I would say that this is a must read for anybody who, like me, owns a lot of books and also feels a lot of pressure to read a lot of books in a year. It kind of just made me reevaluate like the fact that you don't need to read loads, you don't need to get through your TBR as fast as possible. You can take your time, you can read longer books and you just enjoy yourself. And it's not about like how many books you read in a year, and it's not about how many pages you can read either. It's just about reading the books that you enjoy. And I know it sounds so simple, but I feel like on booktube there is a lot of pressure to A, read a lot, and B, read your physical TBR. And although I do want to read my physical TBR and get through it, I don't want to do it as quickly as possible. I don't want to feel like I'm playing catch up on books that are coming out, and also backlist books as well. Like I just want to read to enjoy. And especially if you've seen my end of year tag video where I kind of went on a little bit of a rant about how reading and booktube in general has been making me feel, I feel like this was such a refreshing thing for me to consume, and to just sort of think, you know what, I needed someone to sit me down and say, just read what you want and read what you enjoy and take your time with it. Like, it sounds so daft, but I'm so glad that I read this right at the end of the year, so that I was able to kind of think, yes, like I needed someone to tell me this. I also did an Instagram story when I was reading this just to say like I need to scream about this book, and 2 people have messaged me so far to say like they bought this book specifically because of what I said. So if I can convince anybody else to read this, like please do. It was just mind-opening, and it just, yeah, it's really helped me to just kind of think about how I read and to reevaluate on what I'm doing with what I'm reading. I then read The Cats of the Louvre by Taiyo Matsumoto, and this was a manga, and I did rate it 3 stars. So this was my least favourite book of the entire month, and it was generally just okay. I found it a little bit strange and a little bit pretentious as well, and it was definitely the kind of story that I just generally don't enjoy. If I hadn't seen this beautiful cover, I definitely would not have picked it up in general if I'd known the plot. But it was nice to kind of see a little bit of a different story to what I usually consume. So this is literally about cats who live in the Louvre in France. They kind of live in the attic, and it's very secret that they are there, and they don't want people to know that they're there because they know that they'll get kicked out. And there is one of the like night guards who goes and feeds them and kind of just looks after them, but they're very much like a band of stray cats. And we are following one cat in particular, Snow Baby, who can actually go into paintings, and it is kind of a bit of a strange story where we're following Snow Baby and the mystery of Snow Baby and why that he can go into these different paintings, and also kind of just generally following the cats who live in the Louvre as well. And then also the person who goes and feeds them, he talks a lot about how his sister went missing like 50 years ago because he suspects she disappeared into a painting as well. And so that's kind of how the 2 storylines tie together with the cats and also the humans. The cats themselves, they are just normal cats, but to tell the story, the author has decided to kind of draw them a little bit more anthropomorphic when they talk, especially when they're not seen by humans. I don't know if that was meant to be literal, where they kind of become a bit more human-like when people can't see them, or if it's just the way that they've chosen to tell the story. And I did find it a little bit strange. Like you could have just drawn them as normal cats to say that they were talking. Like you didn't have to draw them like humans. I did find it very pretentious. It is very much kind of the sort of book where it's not necessarily about the plot, it's more about the artwork and the message behind the story, and I didn't really get the message behind the story. And I also didn't find any of the characters particularly likable because it's not about the plot. I feel like it's meant to be more about the people, and I didn't really care about the cats or the humans. Like I just didn't care for any of them really. It was just okay. I wouldn't really recommend it if you have a similar reading taste to me, because I just didn't really care for it. I think if I wasn't reading it for the vlog I would have DNF'd it, and also the fact that it is quite a big, expensive, special like hardback manga. But it was a nice kind of change of pace to what I usually read. But again, I just wasn't really that into what was going on in the story. And then the final book I read in December, and the final book I read in 2022, was the Traveling Cat Chronicles by Hiro Arikawa, and this was another 5-star read. I loved it. It was so emotional. It absolutely broke me at the end, and I knew it was going to be a very sad story, but I didn't expect it to make me cry as much as it did. I thoroughly enjoyed this. We are following the cat Nana and his owner, and they kind of just go on a little bit of a journey together, and it's the story of the journey that they go on and the relationship that they have with each other. And as a cat owner, I completely understood that relationship of the owner and the cat, especially as someone who owns 6 cats, that it's a very special connection that you have with your pets. And I feel like unless you own cats, you can't really fully grasp that special relationship that cat lovers have with their animals. I really enjoyed seeing the journey that they went on and hearing about the friends that Satoru had. I don't want to say why it's so sad, but I suggest kind of looking it up if you are affected easily by things, because it was a really sad book, but I really recommend it. Like, prepare for it to be sad, prepare for it to make you cry, and maybe it won't quite damage you as much as it did for me, maybe. But yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed this. It was absolutely beautiful. I would love to read more in this kind of genre and this style. It wasn't necessarily like the Cat Who Saved books, and I'm comparing them because they're both literary fiction and they're both Japanese translations. It was a literary fiction, it was a story about the people, but it was just, yeah, it was just really good. It was just really good. It was a brilliant way for me to end my reading year. I mean, I wasn't ending it on a high, I was ending it on a very sad, oh my god, this book is tragic, but it was just beautifully written, just a really beautiful story. I absolutely loved this. So these are the 8 books that I read in December. I had such a good reading month. There was a lot in there that I really enjoyed, and it's made me very excited for January and what I'm reading in January, not only because I'm really excited about the books that are on my TBR, but also I feel like I'm in a little bit of a roll at the moment. And again, after reading the Cat Who Saved books, I don't feel that pressure that like I have to read everything as quickly as possible anymore. I feel like I can take my time and enjoy myself, and it's okay if I do that. It's absolutely okay if I do that. So yeah, what a fantastic reading month for me in December. So that was it for this video, guys. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed it, please do remember to give it a big thumbs up and let me know in the comments what you read in December, and also if you've read any of the books that I read and what you thought of them. If you haven't already and you would like to be, please do consider subscribing. I post a new video every single week, and that's it from me today, guys. Bye!